Now, when you're confronted with somebody bleeding and injured, do you help them and then shoot and do all that? And I'll tell you a story about what happened to me one time in a second, but I want you to answer that question first.
You know, another great question. Right after it happened, I mean, you're at the finish line, and every year at the marathon, there's so many EMTs and paramedics and firefighters and police. They literally jumped over that barricade first within seconds.
So you had it covered, so they didn't need you to do anything.
Right.
Because I was in a situation one time in a war zone in Argentina in the Falklands where my photographer got run down and hit his head and was bleeding from the ear on the concrete, and the Army was chasing us. I had to make a decision, and I dragged them off, you know, but at the same time, I'm looking around and trying to do my job, but I figured I had to get this guy out of there because that was more important.
Donald is a very good friend of mine. Who knows? I may end up supporting him for president. If he's a nominee of the party, I might support him even before that. I don't know. Well, what he said about President Bush is absolutely wrong. And I know national intelligence. Several times I've held very, very high national security clearances in the Justice Department. You'd have to be looking for a needle in a haystack and putting the three needles together in order to figure out 9/11. It is not President Clinton's fault. It is not President Bush's fault. It's the fault of the guys who did it.
Looking at what's going on in Iraq right now, unlike a year ago, we saw the mess in Syria, and you talked a little bit about that. If these guys are saying to themselves, man, was my sacrifice worth it? What do you say to them?
I say it really was. The world was better off without Saddam Hussein in power or the Taliban in power. You know, obviously, we're still in Iraq. The presence isn't as significant as it was in 2009, but we're there. And now we've got pilots in harm's way, dealing with a group of ideologues who murder the innocent. Same exact modus operandi of those who murdered 3,000 on our soil.
You said last year, you know, we gave Saddam Hussein the world's going to be better without him, and it is, and America's safer without him, and it is. And you said, you know, history will tell if the Iraqis are going to make the most of their opportunity to live in freedom. Yeah. Did they blow it?
Well, it's not over. There's a lot of, there's a lot of strong institutions in Iraq. The Iraqi people obviously are going to have to make the decision as to whether or not they want to live in peace. They're not ready to do it on their own, and that's the lesson we've learned recently.
Not only that, you knew it in 2007. In fact, this is George Bush, President George Bush, in 2007, before the surge. Well, you're trying to tell people we need a surge, and here's why. Here's what you said, and here's how accurate it is.
Begin withdrawing before our commanders tell us we're ready would be dangerous. It would mean that we'd be risking mass killings on a horrific scale. It would mean we allow the terrorists to establish a safe haven in Iraq to replace the one they lost in Afghanistan. It would mean increasing the probability that American troops would have to return at some later date to confront an enemy that is even more dangerous.
How did you know?
Well, I know the nature of the enemy.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
What do you make of Rudy Giuliani just on the couch a little while ago saying that regarding your comments and George W. Bush and September the 11th, Rudy doesn't feel you're right about it?
Well, I don't care about his comments. The fact is that Jeb Bush, who's look, he's doing horribly. It's an embarrassment to the family. He doesn't even want to use his last name. That Jeb Bush said that his brother gave great security. Well, the fact is, all I did, and I heard this over and over again, and he uses his brother. And finally, I had to say, look, excuse me, but the World Trade Center came down during his reign, let's call it, during his reign. During his term as president, the World Trade Center came down. And everybody said, oh, we never thought of that. Now everybody's saying, wow, we never thought of that. The fact is, he got a free pass because after the World Trade Center came down, we didn't have an attack. But the World Trade Center was the single biggest attack in the history of our country, bigger than Pearl Harbor, because it was an attack on civilians.
How is he supposed to stop that? How is he supposed to find random people throughout the country 9 months into the job that were going to be doing something we couldn't even possibly imagine, that the CIA didn't anticipate, nor did anyone specifically brief him on?
Well, Brian, if you go back and read the documents and read the papers and read the reports, you're going to see that the CIA had information, and so did the NSA, and so did other agencies, and nobody was talking to each other. They all hated each other at the top. There was tremendous disorganization, and had they gotten together, they would have been able to piece it together. Had we had a strong immigration policy, had my immigration policy been intact, and I'd been president, because there's nobody stronger on the borders than I am, had my immigration policy been put forth,
right.
and if it was, you wouldn't have even had these people in the country. Who blew up the World Trade Center? It wasn't the Iraqis, it was Saudi. I mean, take a look at Saudi Arabia. Open the documents. We ought to get Bush or somebody to have the documents opened, because frankly, if you open the documents, I think you're going to see that it was Saudi Arabia. It wasn't Iraq.
That Saudi Arabia did what?
Well, the people came, most of the people came from Saudi Arabia. They didn't come from Iraq. The World Trade Center was not, not knocked down by Iraqis.
Our percentages are much better. You know, not too long ago, there was a poll done where I was up against Obama, and I was equal to Romney in that. So
Does it
we have a
bug you,
lot of
though,
support from
Congressman? I agree. I
independents
mean,
and Democrats.
You've been a remarkable phenomenon, but I always think you're like a sort of a thin Rodney Dangerfield. You don't get any respect. Does that bug you?
Well, I think a lot of people think that. Certainly Jon Stewart thinks so. You know, this whole idea. I mean, if you look, somebody told me, you know, from this last debate, I thought I did rather well. And they went down the number of times they mentioned the other three candidates in the review of the debate. And it was, you know, like 80, 90 times, depending on which it was. I was mentioned one time in all the discussion of the debate after it was over. Right. Now, you might argue I didn't win, or some people argue that I did.
You had the juice.
But it deserved more than one mention on all the stations. Somebody went and added these all up.
Thank you, Congressman.
So what's going on here? You're in this media business. I'd like to know exactly how that comes about.
I had a printout of how many hours I've acted.
Trump on Sunday night seemed to suggest that we've turned the page here. We got more important things to focus on than Hillary Clinton: jobs, the economy, health care. Doesn't seem to be leaning in the direction of appointing a special prosecutor for Hillary Clinton. What's your sense of it?
Let me say, just thank God. I remember one thing, and with sitting next to a war hero, I'm humbled. Back in 2003, it was a British officer, one of the Royal Irish units, who said, "Ferocious in battle, magnanimous in victory." I want Donald Trump, who was ferocious in battle, to be magnanimous in victory now. The last thing this nation needs, and exactly the prescription for keeping open the rural wounds that the country now is going through, and so many people are traumatized, even as other people are elated. The worst thing we could do right now is to have a special prosecutor bring Hillary Clinton up there. You want to see that same cast of characters again? Do you want to really see Jason Chaffetz and Trey Gowdy and Darrell Issa and all these guys going after Hillary Clinton?
But what about the law being the law? You have people that say, you know what, she did something wrong here. That needs to be looked into. She was treated differently. There are a lot of folks out there, even, you know, Mike Pence said this in the debate, saying if it were my son who's in the military who did this, he would have been removed from his post. What about following through?
I want President Obama to pardon Hillary Clinton, and I want him to do it preemptively. Well, so was Richard Nixon. Right. Richard Nixon was never charged.
Right.
He was pardoned for any and all.
President Obama to pardon Hillary
I call on President Obama to pardon Hillary Clinton right now for any acts that may or may not have been done regarding.
But what message does that send, though, to so many people about fairness?
You can understand why
the message. I understand that. I'm a pragmatic idealist. I think of myself with grand notions, but I want things to be done. Right now, what does this country need? We are a nation where 60 million voted one way and 60 million voted the other way, where the cities voted one way and the rural and suburban areas voted another way, where white people voted one way and people of color voted a different way. What the president has to do is try to bring everybody together. We're not going to heal these divides overnight, but the last thing we need is a high-profile persecution of Hillary Clinton, who I submit has paid enough for all of her alleged misdeeds. She has paid enough.
Well, she paid at the ballot box is where she paid.
Well, she's paid in her soul. She's paid in her
What about the guys that paid in Benghazi? What about the guys that paid elsewhere? The national security secret she let go because she was willy-nilly with our... I mean, that has to matter.
I absolutely reject your characterization of Benghazi. I do. And I was
may,
almost
but a lot of people
killed in
don't.
Libya. I know the Benghazi scene, and I tell you, Benghazi was the beginning of the malignant hype that ultimately brought down the Clintons. It was basically what happened post-Benghazi was political much more than it was military. And the political, it was the beginning of the campaign that destroyed Hillary Clinton's character. It went from Benghazi to the private email server, and then WikiLeaks joined in, and who knows what job the Russians did, and I think that deserves to be probed. That going forward, to me, what I would like to see, what role, and this, rather than whether Hillary Clinton is going to be prosecuted for imaginary, real or imagined offenses, what I would like to see is a real probe, a bilateral probe led by the Republican administration, by the Trump administration, into what exact role did Russia play or not play in the WikiLeaks scandal. Did they penetrate our cybersecurity? Are they now a threat to manipulate all of our elections going forward?
Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, has issued a warning that has his supporters, they're ready to publish a deluge of leaked documents if his activities are curtailed or if he's killed or arrested. But what's the political implication here? Who gets hurt the most by this doomsday bomb? So far, these documents are all State Department related. And just yesterday, Hillary Clinton announced that this would be the last public office she intends to hold. Coincidence or not? Bob, what about it? All of a sudden, there was rumor that Hillary Clinton was kind of laying back during the midterm elections and laying back during South Korea-North Korea conflict. And then this, because the thought was that she was maybe make a run for president in 2012. And now this. Is this a mark on her record?
No, and I would not for a second say that it's absolutely not the case that she may run. I think she may run. She may not think she's going to run, but she may run. The other thing is, who gets hurt from this? The American people. The way to deal with in the national security of the United States, the way to deal with this is pretty simple. We got special ops forces. I mean, a dead man can't leak stuff. This guy's a traitor, a treasonous, and he has broken every law of the United States. The guy ought to be. And I'm not for the death penalty, so if I'm not for the death penalty, the only one to do it, illegally shoot the son of a.
Well, what about it?
Oh, I can't believe I believe with. I'm along with Bob. You know what? When he comes out and says that he's holding everyone hostage, that he's going to release the names of people, putting them in harm's way to be killed or whatever, soldiers and people who are undercover with the CIA. This guy's got to go, and nobody should hold this country. And we do agree with each other, Bob. Immune him.
Go ahead, Joel.
I think that the Doomsday Files, the U.S. is probably going to be prepared to have those released if it means the permanent end of WikiLeaks, because you cut the head off the snake, to quote King Abdullah. And I think that's what they want to do. Maybe through arrest, maybe otherwise.
This released by the Post today, it says that some of the documents that were originally leaked in the original cables outline some targets that if they were destroyed, disrupted, or exploited, there would be immediate and deleterious effect on the United States. I mean, if there's any question on some of this stuff being dangerous and harmful and hurtful and possibly even deadly, there shouldn't be.
You know, I was a Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and sent out a lot of cables when I was doing that, and it was during the midst of the Panama Canal treaties and the SALT agreements. Some of that stuff, if it had been leaked, would have been very damaging. And on my own hand, forget people who had serious jobs in the State Department. This is much more serious than people initially thought. And as you get more and more into these cables, you notice there's more stories. $250,000 is a lot. You can put a lot of stories together.
And who wants to take this? Go, Bo, take this one. Meanwhile, Assange has called for President Obama's resignation if it can be proven that he approved spying by U.S. diplomats.
Well,
we want that, don't we? Don't we want to know what they're doing?
Let me tell you something. That was our biggest downfall. We didn't have the intelligence when Obama, when he was in Afghanistan, planning with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda to bomb us. If we had informants in there, people that knew this was happening, we could have possibly averted it, like we have averted a lot of attacks in America. And without this spying, the thing that people don't want, without it, you're going to have dead Americans. And this little punk. Now I stand up for Obama. Obama, if you're listening tonight, you should take this guy out, have the CIA take him out.
Where's Obama?
First of all, let's say one thing clear here about diplomats and spying. Every embassy of the United States around the world has a station chief of the CIA in it, and everybody knows it, number one.
Yes.
Number two, since the beginning of the diplomatic corps, they have always been asked to send information that they pick up about their host country. That's nothing new. In fact, when I was in the Peace Corps, they almost asked us to do it. But they had questions about Obama. I think Obama is in a very difficult spot here. Look, there's so much here. There is so much here, and he's got to be very careful. He's about to have meetings with heads of state in different parts of the world, and he is running a very delicate role here. Leave him alone on this one. This is not his fault.
No, but where is he, though? I mean, well, hold on.
Where is he? What do you mean, where is
he? Shouldn't he be out there? We had Gibbs come out and say, by the way, ignore this. This isn't the big. We're not going to let one guy with a laptop.
This is one thing the President of the United States should not comment on.
Should not comment.
Should not.
You got North Korea. I think is the most dangerous thing happening right now with this little psychopath with his fat-faced son that was at Disney World over there. This guy's ready to go off at any time. And South Korea said if they hit one more time, they're going to hit back. This is real delicate. Imagine if it comes out that all of a sudden President Obama said this little fat guy with his little fat ugly son there, or some derogatory sense. This could set off a world war.
Let's keep in mind now the South Koreans are going to practice artillery practice on Friday of this week. This thing is getting very dangerous, and nobody's paying much attention to it.
So far, the only people I've seen expressing outrage at the top are Mitch McConnell and Hillary Clinton. I want the leader of the free world out there calling it out for what it is. This man, Julian Assange, has in his sights one country alone, and that is the United States. He is out after us.
And it's extortion.
And it's extortion. He's a blackmail, extortionist terrorist.
Can I read this? His British attorneys have said they would fight any extradition to Sweden on the grounds that he could then be sent to the United States. I kid you not, where politicians, including Sarah Palin and Mike Huckabee, have called for his execution. And now add Bob Beckel.
And if
the U.S. wants him dead, if the U.S. actually wants him dead, they're not going to go through an extradition.
Why don't we just
listen? Why don't we get Putkin? He could give him some of that little radioactive stuff.
We do every night in Afghanistan. There's special operations forces that go after the enemies of the United States. This man is an enemy of the United States.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to say thank you. I want to thank Bob Beckel, but he's going to stick around. Joel Mowbray and Bo Dietl are going to join us again.
Last night said that Mr. Obama was being smart for not saying anything at all about WikiLeaks. I said I want my leader to demonstrate the anger that this should never ever happen.
Bad move.
Why?
Well, Britt was exactly right. You don't want Obama to make more of the story than it is. Like he did with the first time when the leaks came out of the Afghani and the Iraqi war, and the president and his people said, nothing new here, move on. Nothing to see here.
So you're content with basically letting this WikiLeaks operation, which actually went down today, somebody attacked it and knocked it off there. You're content in letting them do whatever they want?
Well, content. I'm glad this information came out. I'm glad the American taxpayer got some transparency.
Are you glad that the American government cannot protect top secret cables? Are you glad?
No, I think they should be able to protect it, but it's not WikiLeaks' fault.
It's not WikiLeaks' fault.
The dissemination of information, as Judge Napolitano would tell you, is actually protected.
So now Judge Napolitano is supposed to be the litmus test for rational thinking?
Well, I believe he's
is that what you're telling me?
Didn't you call him one of the great legal minds in this country, isn't he?
Did you not get the sarcasm of that
remark?
Is that
what that was?
Okay. What do you say?
This is the third time WikiLeaks has released top secret information. First on the Iraq War, second
Combs
on
says they shouldn't be held
and third on our foreign policy and diplomacy. And the reason why I agree with you that the Commander-in-Chief should be very forceful and passionate in denouncing this and ordering his both Secretary of State and Attorney General to go after this full force is that each of those 3 times endangered American lives and the lives of those who are cooperating with the United States government.
No evidence of that. There's no evidence. Tell me what life was compromised. By the way, where were conservatives on the leak on Valerie Plame that endangered her career? They were quiet about that. They had no problem with that leak. The retribution
I had a problem
against
with that
Joe
leak.
Wilson.
I didn't want poor Valerie Plame.
But
good. Look how it all turned out.
Most conservatives didn't have a problem with that, and Scooter Libby's term was commuted. His prison term was commuted.
I don't want anybody getting leaked for anything. So don't be.
But
you must be alone among conservatives.
Holmes is making my case because in the Plame Libby case, the left piled on Scooter Libby unfairly over a CIA intelligence officer that her life wasn't in threat,
and now
you actually have lives in threat.
And the left
That's a pretty good point, Holmes. It's the opposite. The conservatives had no problem with ruining this woman's career.
But what about you? You were outraged by the Valerie Plame leak, and now you're not outraged by WikiLeaks.
I was outraged by all of the. I think the leaks are good.
You just said WikiLeaks shouldn't be held accountable.
Wait a minute. WikiLeaks is a very different situation.
It's different.
Yes.
They're still leaking stuff that's top
They're giving
secret.
information. Wait a minute. Where's conservatives on?
Wait, no, I don't. Where's Alan
conservatives on? I want transparency. I want my tax dollars accounted for. And we trust the government all of a sudden to do the right thing, right?
You realize you're just blathering now.
No, I don't realize that, Mr. Riley.
The audience just heard you say you have no problem with WikiLeaks and shouldn't bother them for releasing. Yet you had a major problem with leaks from whoever did it with Valerie
I'll tell you what
Plame.
the difference is, and here's my opportunity to respond. This was particular retribution by the Bush administration toward one woman
and Assange isn't retribution?
because of one guy's career, because of Joe Wilson and his opposition to the Iraq War.
So because it was personal, you objected?
It was personal to them. What Assange is doing is
that's not personal?
releasing. No, it's not personal.
No, he doesn't.
He is
just
trying
like
to,
the U.S.
No, it's not personal. He is actually trying to stop these ridiculous, inane, insane, illegal, and immoral wars. They're two very different situations.
Okay.
That the U.S. starts for no reason.
Here we go.
Yeah, well, Iraq was no reason.
Okay.
Iraq was a despicable foreign policy.
Without relitigating the Iraq War, let's get back to your basic question, Bill, which is why the Commander-in-Chief has not come out with any kind of statement on this. Instead, he wheeled out Attorney General Holder and the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, both of whom gave very dispassionate, mechanical, and monotone statements on this. Where's the passion on this? Where's the passion on any national security crisis from this administration?
Well, where's the indictment against?
You know what it is? You know what it is? This president wants everybody else to be the face of the crises and the debacle. He is voting present yet again, just as he voted present on everything else in his administration. He's voting present here when American lives are in danger.
Hasn't this president killed more of the bad guys than the previous president in the same time frame? Hasn't he gone out and got more of these terrorists?
Well, that's what I said. That's what I'd like to see, a little drone hit Assange, right?
Oh, you want to get?
No, I said, now they're going to get me on Media Matters again.
In other words, you want to get the guy who disseminates the information because you don't want information.
I think he's a bad guy, Colin.
Whether or not he's a bad guy, he did not break the law.
If we lived in Great Britain, 007 would be getting him.
I thought you guys wanted transparency and information about where our taxpayer dollars are.
All I want is a nice supper, Holmes. All right, thank you very much for being in here.
Information warfare is warfare, and Julian Assange is engaged in warfare. Information terrorism, which leads to people getting killed, is terrorism, and Julian Assange is engaged in terrorism. He should be treated as an enemy combatant. WikiLeaks should be closed down permanently and decisively.
Well, you don't have to act panic. You can act tough and say, if we catch you, we're going to hang you.
Yeah.
Well, whatever.
We heard some of that from Holder.
Julian Assange is a cyber terrorist in wartime. He's guilty of sabotage, espionage, crimes against humanity. He should be killed.
I was in El Salvador, and I saw nuns get shot in the back of the head.